They told us he vanished, that the name Satoshi Nakamoto was a ghost of the internet, a phantom credited with unleashing Bitcoin and then walking into permanent silence. But silence has a strange way of cracking. In early 2025, one of the oldest Bitcoin wallets, untouched since the dawn of the blockchain, suddenly stirred. Digital dust lifted, coins worth hundreds of millions shifted, and the shadow of Satoshi stretched across the network once again. The question wasn't just who moved them, it was whether the ghost had finally returned. Welcome to Black Thread Mysteries. Here we walk into the places the world refuses to look, tracing threads that bind the unexplainable. And right now, we follow the thread that leads to the creator of Bitcoin, and perhaps to the very edge of what money, identity, and control really mean. Before we begin, remember, what you're about to hear blends known facts, verifiable blockchain activity, and interpretations that remain theories. Nothing here is financial advice. This is a story, a shadowed one, that leaves you to decide where the truth lies. It all began on January the 10th, 2025. At exactly 3:14 a.m. UTC, blockchain trackers noticed an impossible movement. A wallet containing 1,100 bitcoins, coins untouched since 2009, executed its first transfer in 16 years. The ripple was immediate. Markets shook, forums exploded, and whispers began to twist into theories. If this wasn't Satoshi Nakamoto, then who else could possibly hold the keys? The hunt reignited, but this time it wasn't just about the myth of Bitcoin's father. It was about whether the hand behind that wallet still lives among us, or has been replaced. The figure known as Satoshi Nakamoto has always been a cipher, a name without a face, a mind without a body. Some claim he or they were a Japanese coder. Others whisper of a team of cryptographers from the UK or the US. The evidence has always been fragments, timestamps on forum posts, writing patterns, odd silences between replies. What made the January 2025 movement chilling wasn't just the scale of money, it was the timing. Global regulators had just announced stricter control over crypto, and whispers of central bank digital currencies filled the news. Almost like a response, those ancient coins awakened. Was this a signal, a warning, or a final goodbye from the architect who foresaw everything? Old theories clawed their way back. Hal Finney, the first person ever to receive a Bitcoin transaction, was resurrected in online debates, despite his death years ago. Some pointed fingers at Nick Szabo, whose writings eerily predated Bitcoin's mechanics. Others accused governments themselves of being Satoshi, using the myth as a mask. But if Satoshi was gone, dead, or never existed as one person, who moved the coins? Blockchain data showed the transfer split into dozens of smaller wallets, each structured with precision. No laundering, no panic, just calm, calculated moves, as though someone were leaving breadcrumbs across the digital ether. A map, or a message. The eerie question lingered. Was Satoshi watching all along, hidden behind the curtain of code, waiting for the right moment to speak again? What terrifies the crypto world isn't just Satoshi's mystery, it's his power. In total, wallets linked to Nakamoto are believed to hold around 1 million bitcoins. At current value, that's nearly impossible wealth. If even a fraction were sold, markets could collapse overnight. And so, the January 2025 transfer wasn't just a mystery. It was a tremor that threatened the ground beneath digital money itself. Traders panicked, governments scrambled. Online sleuths opened every archive they could find, desperate for a pattern. But then came something stranger. Days after the transfer, a cryptic message appeared on a forgotten forum once frequented by early Bitcoin pioneers. The post was short, anonymous, and signed only with an old PGP key traced back to Nakamoto himself. It read, "The chains tighten, but the ledger never forgets. You will see me in the flow." Authenticity is debated to this day, but the alignment with the wallet's move was too close to dismiss. If the signature was real, it meant Satoshi, or someone with access to his tools, was alive and watching. Theories spiraled darker. Some claimed Satoshi had always been a construct, an identity maintained by an intelligence agency, or worse, an AI birthed in the shadows of early cryptography labs. Others believed the movement signaled preparation for a final act, unleashing or destroying the very system he had built. For now, the blockchain waits. Every block mined ticks like a heartbeat, echoing the question, who is Satoshi Nakamoto? And why now? The history of Bitcoin's origin reads like the script of a conspiracy thriller, equal parts technical manual and whispered legend. In October 2008, in the quiet corners of a cryptography mailing list where academics and hobbyists measured their thoughts in algorithms, a paper landed titled Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. The author named at the top was Satoshi Nakamoto. There was no biography, no LinkedIn profile, no academic affiliation, just a name that might be a man, a woman, or a carefully chosen mask. Within months of that white paper's arrival, the first Bitcoin block, the Genesis block, was mined. Developers and early adopters who watched it form noticed an oddity embedded in its code. A plain text headline lifted from that day's edition of the Times, Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks. Far from a throwaway Easter egg, the line felt deliberate, a punctuation on the first page of a new monetary experiment. Was it a manifesto? A warning? A timestamp with teeth? That message, etched immutably into the blockchain, read as a creed. This system would exist apart from the institutions that had failed so many. As adoption trickled forward, Satoshi's presence dominated early conversations. He posted patiently technical posts, answered questions with surgical clarity, and reviewed code with a craftsman's touch. But as the network matured, he withdrew. By 2010, the cadence of his emails slowed. Long pauses, then shorter messages, then silence. Developers who had exchanged hours of debate with him later described him as polite, razor-smart, and oddly reserved. The person who explained a complex proof as if reading a textbook aloud, never revealing more of himself than necessary. Then he vanished, not abruptly but like a lamp being gently dimmed. No flourish, no farewell press briefing, no signature beyond the published code. What remained, though, were wallets, addresses seeded in the earliest days, filled with coins that represented untapped fortunes. They sat like sleeping giants in the ledger, immense holdings that never moved, immune to the petty thefts and regulatory grasping that defined financial history. Every so often, forums erupted with rumors, a patch bearing his initials, an offhand forum post that matched his cadence, a blurred photograph claimed to be him. Each turned out to be smoke. Until decades later, when the sleeping ledger shuddered. Then came the 2025 wallet move. It landed with the thunder of something resurfacing, a ripple across exchanges, a spike in on-chain watchers' dashboards, 100 think pieces wondering whether myth had finally grown a skeleton again. The timing, the addresses involved, the cadence of the transfers, everything suggested intention. Legends rarely return merely to check on old projects. When they reappear in stories, it's to finish what was begun, to settle a debt, or to force a reckoning. Whether this was the beginning of an answer or the opening of a new question, the world that had once whispered about Satoshi now strained to listen. Forensic analysts, the new archaeologists of the digital era, brought every tool they had to examine the 2025 transaction. They parsed the raw hex of the blocks, traced UTXO flows, time-stamped confirmations down to the second, and compared fee structures against known economic events. What they discovered did not resemble a fluke or a panicked liquidation. The way the coins split, the cadence of confirmations, even the seemingly trivial choice of transaction fees read like punctuation in a sentence. There was deliberateness, inputs chosen with care, outputs arranged in patterns that hinted at knowledge beyond standard wallet hygiene. Public theorists took up the trail with fever. Some pointed to archaic encryption references, claiming patterns aligned with Cold War-era ciphers, a kind of intellectual breadcrumb trail that would reward those schooled in historic codes. Others noticed numeric sequences within the amounts and confirmations that corresponded to prime numbers, mathematical constants, or astronomical cycles. When clustered on visualizations, the sequences made pleasing spirals and grids, tempting pattern seekers into stories. Skeptics shrugged. Humans find patterns in noise, they said. Yet the devotees, the long-time observers of Bitcoin's infancy, felt a different certainty. Satoshi had always favored elegance and subtlety. The white paper read almost like philosophy. His code was precise enough to be a craft and cryptic enough to be art. Then a colder possibility crept into private briefings. What if those keys were no longer secret? 16 years is an eternity in cryptography's small heartbeats. Key management mistakes, advances in computational attacks, or the slow human unspooling of passwords could expose private keys. If someone had indeed cracked or otherwise acquired the keys to those ancient addresses, the movement might not be the ghostly return of a founder, but the work of a thief wearing his identity like a mask. That thief would not merely be taking money, they would be wielding the mythology of Bitcoin as leverage, and that could destabilize confidence faster than any market sell-off. Digging deeper revealed an odd mix. Many of the newly active wallets resumed only minimal, almost ceremonial transactions, as if testing the waters. But one wallet, subtle and sly, made a quiet interaction with a known exchange. Tiny withdrawals routed through mixers and then into small exchange accounts. Funds broken up into amounts that stayed below strict reporting thresholds. No dramatic dumps, just whispers of liquidity slipping back into the market that hinted at a motive perhaps less theatrical, testing, probing, or a very careful redeployment. The digital ghost had awakened, and it seemed intent, whether to signal, to prove, or to extract. The question haunting investigators wasn't just who moved the coins. It was whether the move marked the beginning of a plan orchestrated by its creator, or a slow, surgical robbery of history itself. By February 2025, the mystery crawled into mainstream headlines and did not crawl out. Financial pages that once treated Bitcoin as a speculative oddity paraded the awakened addresses across their layouts. Influencers with massive followings posted breathless live streams. Pundits debated motives on radio. Regulators issued statements that read like careful, underlined warnings. Yet, amidst all the noise, a single stubborn truth held. Nobody could prove who, or what, had touched the Nakamoto coins. The blockchain told of movement, but not of identity. This uncertainty is what makes the tale linger. It's not merely about market capitalization or price charts. It is about control and anonymity, about whether billions of dollars encoded as ones and zeros have a master we cannot see. It conjures age-old anxieties. Who has the power to change systems, and what is the cost of that power? For a network built on trustless consensus, the reanimation of founder wallets threatens a different kind of trust. Faith in the system's story. And this is where you come in, Black Thread community. Pause the theories, drop your most stubborn idea in the comments. Do you think the 2025 wallet moves were orchestrated by Satoshi himself, stepping briefly back into the world he designed? Or was it the work of a thief who somehow cracked time's safe and slipped into history's skin? Maybe it wasn't a single person at all. Perhaps an organization, a clandestine state actor, or an advanced AI with access to cryptographic breakthroughs. Tell us your theory, and importantly, tell us where you're watching from. Put your pin on the map of mystery seekers. I want to see the globe light up with our community's guesses. While the world argued, the blockchain offered another jolt. A second Nakamoto-linked wallet began to stir. This wasn't a lone twitch, but a small, coordinated ripple. The digital AWA, kenning wasn't a single tremor. It was a series of carefully timed ripples, like fingers tapping on a table until someone noticed. If you felt a chill reading that, you should, because now the ledger was speaking in a voice that suggested intent, and not everyone listening thought they were part of the intended audience. The second wallet's behavior was stranger still. It contained far fewer coins than the legendary early addresses, but its action was conspicuous not for its scale, but for its form. Instead of dispersing funds across exchanges or mixing them into countless small outputs, it executed a single large transfer to an address no analyst could immediately link. Normally on-chain movements that large screamed profit-taking or strategic sale. This one, however, read like an encoded sentence. When sleuths decoded the transaction metadata and cross-referenced the transaction ID against known texts, a startling alignment emerged. The hex string mapped, via a particular decoding method circulated among crypto-linguists, to an excerpt from the original Bitcoin whitepaper. Not a paraphrase, an almost verbatim shard. To those who had watched Bitcoin's early days, the move felt like a signature, deliberate, private, and impossible to ignore. If intentional, the sender had sought to leave a mark that only the initiated could read. That discovery spawned the cipher theory. Its advocates argued that Nakamoto had built more than currency. He had embedded a slow-releasing puzzle into the blockchain. Bitcoin was, in this telling, less product and more project art, a living cryptographic exhibit. The white paper had been the opening note, then subsequent transfers, arranged in patterns and messages, formed a conversation with those paying attention. Some felt honored, as if invited into an intellectual scavenger hunt spanning decades. Others felt mocked. What if the creator was toying with humanity, dangling clues that would never lead to a concrete reveal? Markets reacted with the irrationality markets always exhibit when myth and money collide. Traders, sensing potential revelation and the volatility that would follow, began speculative runs that pushed Bitcoin into sharp oscillations, and some investors sold into fear, others bought on rumor. The result was price action so violent that even the most seasoned traders felt queasy. Was Nakamoto preparing to step forth and claim ownership? Or was he proving an unsettling point, that the system he birthed could be steered, emotionally, if not centrally, by narrative alone? Beyond the financial churn, an undercurrent of unease took hold online. Forums split into camps, those seeking to decode further transfers as if reading a holy text, and those who warned against anthropomorphizing code. Amid the noise, a smaller, darker concern grew. If Bitcoin was, as the cipher theory proposed, an evolving puzzle, what understood purpose lay at the end? Revelation? Control? A final key that would reshape access? Puzzles by nature have endpoints, and many wondered what would happen if Bitcoin's puzzle reached its conclusion. March 2025 felt like months-long nights for on-chain watchers. The blockchain's steady heartbeat grew irregular. Wallets long dormant twitched, and then rehearsed moves that broke patterns only intelligible to those watching closely. Investigators deployed every resource: machine learning models trained on transaction graphs, linguistic analysts cross-referencing decoded payloads with historical texts, and teams mapping timestamps against global events to see whether these digital notes corresponded to human history's own punctuation. The patterns multiplied. Some groups saw spirals forming when addresses were graphed spatially. Others found sequences that mirrored famous mathematical series. The results were seldom definitive, but their consistency across analytical methods suggested more than random chance. Those who believed in design pointed to the deliberate recurrence of early block addresses in these patterns, as if a composer reused familiar motifs. Then an even colder detail emerged. At least 3 of the awakened wallets had, at various points, made micro-interactions with addresses tied to government-affiliated entities. The amounts were negligible, fractions of a coin. but the recipients were not anonymous. These tiny transfers touched addresses previously connected to agencies that track illicit finance and national security teams investigating cryptocurrencies. Whether the transfers were tests, signals, or attempts at communication, the implication was startling. If whoever moved the coins intended to speak, they weren't speaking to the public. They were speaking to institutions that had long watched Bitcoin from the margins. This raised a new, unnerving possibility. Perhaps the ledger's messages were never crafted for mass comprehension. Perhaps the blockchain was a private channel between its creator and the powers that watch the world's financial arteries. The more investigators probed, the more it seemed the ledger had multiple audiences: public observers, private elites, and the silent watchers within governments. The ledger's language, encoded in transfers and timestamps, might be comprehensible only to those with the right keys, literal or interpretive. Faced with that hypothesis, some observers felt excluded, others felt manipulated. If the ledger's messages targeted agencies, what were the implications for sovereignty, oversight, and the principle of decentralization? The haunting truth was that a system designed to be open and permissionless might still host conversations meant for a select few. And if the messages were indeed directed at institutional players, then perhaps much of what we thought of as the public narrative was window dressing, and the real play was happening behind the ledger's glass. As spring advanced, the legend did what legends do. It gathered weight. Rumors of sealed rooms and off-the-record meetings began to slip into the quieter corners of tech journalism. Whispers mentioned private conversations between industry titans, emissaries from central banks, and security agencies attempting to verify claims. One anonymous tip claimed a person had stepped forward with documentation purporting to prove they were Nakamoto. Another suggested a shadowy consortium had formed to manage fallout quietly. None of these claims could be verified, but their circulation intensified speculation. Meanwhile, the on-chain reality continued to erode complacency. Week after week, wallets seeded in Bitcoin's infancy. Addresses that had been fossils in the ledger's strata resumed movement. Coins that should have remained an archaeological curiosity began seeping into the present, measured and seemingly intentional. For each micro-transfer or encoded message, analysts spun new theories, explanations ranging from strategic redistribution, theatrical signaling, to the formation of a modern monetary doctrine encoded into movement. The market effects were real and immediate. Long-term holders watched their balances bounce on sentiment swings. Exchanges tightened controls as regulators leaned closer. Investors, who had once considered Bitcoin a hedge or speculative bet, stared at raw ledger entries like a haunted mirror, seeing not only value but the history and mystery that undergirded it. Faith fractured in subtle ways. Trust in immutability collided with the realization that human actors, with motives both clear and inscrutable, still touched the chain. Yet despite the heat, no face emerged to take a bow. No press conference, no manifesto beyond the digital signatures and coded messages. The transfers continued in a mechanical rhythm, deliberate, private, and impersonal. Whoever, or whatever, controlled the keys, opted for motion instead of revelation. That choice, perhaps, was the most terrifying thing of all. It suggested that the ledger's authority did not rest on personality or celebrity, but on movement itself. The truth, if it existed, preferred to remain cloaked behind transactions rather than language. And maybe the real terror settled not on the presence of an answer, but on its absence, that the greatest digital mystery of our age might not be meant to be solved. Some shadows, once cast, prefer to remain eternal. Tonight we followed the ledger's cold trail, the ghost of Bitcoin's creator stirring addresses untouched for 16 years, the forensic puzzles, the encoded messages threaded into transactions, and the slow, unnerving rhythm of movement that refused easy interpretation. We watched theories bloom, from the poetic notion of a founder returning to finish a work, to the darker possibilities of theft, institutional machination, or an engineered problem designed to test trust itself. Each theory carried its own consequences. Regardless of motive, one thing is undeniable. The 2025 movements revived a myth and remodeled it for a world where finance, narrative, and technology collide. The name Satoshi Nakamoto may be a mask, a person, or a group identity. Perhaps it was always intended to be ephemeral. Perhaps his disappearance was part of Bitcoin's DNA, a design choice to prevent Genesis authoritarianism. But the awakened wallets prove that even a system architect can leave riddles that echo long after they step away. If this tale sent a chill down your spine, if you hunger for more tangled mysteries where technology and human nature intersect, show it. Like, share, and subscribe to Black Thread Mysteries. Drop your theories below. Who do you think moved the coins, and what was the message? Pin your location so we can map where our community watches from. Let's see this mystery light spread across the globe. Until the next unraveling, keep your eyes open. In the ledger's glow, shadows shift, and sometimes the smallest movement reveals the largest truth.